Out just moments ago, and we have our top team here this morning for reaction. Our senior White House correspondent Jake Tapper is here, and we're going to start with Christiane Amanpour, of course, host of This Week. When you hear Lama Hassan, and you, as she said, unprecedented. We've never seen this in Egypt, shutting down the country like that.
We haven't seen it in Egypt, but we've seen it elsewhere where they've had these similar demonstrations, Iran, Tunisia, etc. So this is now standard operating procedure from these governments who know that it is social network that is the principal organizing factor for these demonstrations. What's happening here is really critical. Egypt is the one major Arab country to which the United States gives more than $1 billion a year, a close ally over the Middle East peace process, one of only 2 Arab countries to have made peace with Israel, and a close ally in the attempt to be a bulwark against terrorism. However, what is happening here now is young people dispensing with their fear across the Arab world, and now the United States has been calling for democracy, freedom, social reform for decades in the Arab world, and it looks like it's happening right now. So the question is, will the U.S. be able to be on the curve and lead this curve and help its allies there implement reform? Or is it going to be behind this curve?
What do you think the answer is going to be there, Christiane? You bring up many excellent points.
Well, this is the very close thing that the U.S. is now grappling with, because obviously it knows that there are risks if these leaders fall, risks in terms of their own interests. What it has to do is to get behind the aspirations of the people and to use its influence to encourage the leaders to implement reform. For instance, the people now are calling for President Mubarak to have a proper succession. There is no vice president. There have been no proper elections. The last parliamentary elections were by many people considered to be rigged. There is a leader who's gone in right now, Mohammed al-Baradei. Everybody here in the United States knows him as head of the IAEA, and was actually quite a thorn in the U.S. side during the war in Iraq. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he's out there trying to lead these people. But this is a popular group of young people who are fed up with poverty, fed up with the corruption, fed up with authoritarianism, and like in Tunisia, it started because of unemployment and the poverty.
So lots of reasons why we here in the U.S. should be concerned and watching this as closely as we are. Yemen.
Well, it looks like some of this is spilling over into Yemen as well. Over this week, in fact, yesterday there were, by any estimate, something like 20,000 people on the streets. In Yemen, it has even less ability with the people than in Egypt. However, Yemen is against Al-Qaeda. So people there are concerned, and the U.S. is concerned, that again, if this is not managed properly,
well, you're going to have another busy weekend, and watch Sunday on This Week, and Newt Gingrich, one of those that will be.
That's absolutely right.
All right. Thank you, Christiane.
Okay, let's get a little bit more on this with Jake Tapper right now. Christiane talked about the tension the U.S. faces in its policy. In the last several days, clear at the top levels of the White House, both Egypt and Yemen.
That's right, and President Obama has demanded daily briefings on this. There's an interagency task force that's discussing this daily. But as Christiane points out, the U.S. is in a tough position here because the revolution is being Twitterized. Everybody's seeing what's going on. But the U.S. is the one that is backing Mubarak, who is a key ally, who has been there for the U.S. when it comes to brokering Mideast peace, when it comes to opposing Iran, when it comes to recognizing Iraq's government. So there is a lot invested by the U.S. in Mubarak. And they have been pushing behind the scenes for Mubarak to get ahead of this, to embrace these reforms. He has not. And so right now it puts the U.S. in a very awkward position.
That's right, and they don't want to cut him off, but they could end up, as Christiane said, behind the curve. Let's switch gears to domestic policy. We saw yesterday the new White House Chief of Staff put it on an email basically announcing the rest of the White House staff changes. And Jake, it seems like a lot of old players in new positions.
That's exactly right. You have the director of the health care task force in the White House, Nancy Ann DeParle. She'll be a deputy chief of staff. The director of scheduling, Alyssa Mastromonaco. She'll also be a deputy chief of staff. And then, of course, the face of the White House, the public face of the White House, is Vice President Biden's communications director, Jay Carney, who, George, you and I know as the former bureau chief for Time magazine. And, of course, he's married to our own Claire Shipman.
That's right. He and Claire actually appeared many times on This Week when I was the anchor. And, of course, Claire will now not be covering the White House. But Jay has actually, when he was at Time, actually talked about the position of White House press secretary. Take a look.
The best press secretaries were very deft at serving both their boss, the president, the White House, the administration, and the press, and not. And it's a tricky job. I'm sure I wouldn't be any good at it.
He's sitting there next to Joe Lockhart, Bill Clinton's press secretary, but he said he couldn't do it then, but he's actually had a 2-year apprenticeship now as Joe Biden's communications director. So how has he changed?
Well, he's been a very effective and forceful advocate for the vice president in the last 2 years, and you've seen Vice President Biden's press improve quite a bit. Jay understands what we do, having been a journalist. He understands that not every story is going to be positive. There's going to be some negative graphs in there. So he brings a savvy to the business. We'll see what he's like in front of the cameras. That's a different gig altogether.
And that'll be brand new for him. And Vice President Biden actually pushed this appointment quite hard.
Very aggressively.
Okay. Jake, thanks very much.
All right, everyone, we're going to move from the West Wing, shall we say, to the East Wing now. My exclusive interview with Michelle Obama. We met at Fort Jackson yesterday in South Carolina, where the First Lady unveiled her campaign.